All right, so I'm going to title this video Muscular Contractions and Movements. So what we're going to go through in this video is basically when your muscle contracts. So you now have learned how muscles contract, okay? What are the specific terms that we give to those movements? And we're going to talk about muscular relationships with pairings, etc., etc. Okay, so our first terms that I need you guys comfortable with are the origin and insertion. Now I will go through origin and insertion for major muscles in the next video, okay? But just for now, get this down. Origin and insertion points. The origin point is the point of an attachment to a stationary bone, and the insertion point is the point of attachment at the movable end of a bone. So we're going to use biceps again because they're the most visible example. So when you flex your bicep, okay, what part of the body moves? The lower arm, okay? This is the movable bone, so we know the insertion point has to be down here somewhere, okay? The bicep is on your humerus, and when you flex your bicep, your humerus doesn't move, so it is the stationary bone. So the origin point is up here. So the bicep's origin, it mainly originates at the head of the humerus, but part of it does roll onto the scapula. But the insertion point is down here on your radius, on top here, okay? So when you flex, it pulls like this, okay? That is your origin and insertion points. Okay, agonist, antagonist, and stabilizers. Overall, we call this concept muscle relationships, okay? Every movement has an agonist and every movement has an antagonist, and most movements have stabilizers. The agonist in a movement is the prime mover. It is the muscle that contracts to cause movement. So if we're looking at my bicep curl, if I do a bicep curl, what is the main muscle that is contracting to cause a bicep curl? The biceps, all right? It is the one that is shortening, okay? It is the one that the tension is going through when I do a bicep curl. On the opposite ends of the spectrum, we have the antagonist. It is the opposite muscle that must relax to enable or allow the movement to occur. So for me to do this, there is a muscle on the other side of my arm which cannot be contracting at the same time, being the triceps. If I tried to contract my bicep and my tricep at the same time, which I'm doing now, no movement occurs. And we have the name for that too, which I'll go through on the next screen. Stabilizer muscles are still muscles that are involved in the movement, okay? They absorb tension, they allow you to be safe during your movements, they increase movement efficiency, all right? So when I'm doing a bicep curl, depending on how much weight I'm using, you will increase the amount of stabilizers used throughout the body. But you would say that if you're doing a standing bicep curl, your abdominals would be contracting to absorb some force so you don't just fall forward. You would say that your deltoids are contracting to keep your shoulder and arm in position. And your forearms are definitely contracting because you're holding a weight there, all right? So they're all flexing, so they're stabilizers. So agonist is the one that moves, your antagonist is the one that relaxes, and your stabilizers just support the movement, okay? If we were to flip it around, all right? So if I was now to do a tricep extension, if I was to do a tricep extension over my head, this relationship is now flipped, because if I'm holding a weight here and I'm trying to extend, this now becomes the agonist, okay? It is the main mover causing me to contract my arm. My bicep becomes the antagonist. It must relax. So they're muscle relationships. All right, types of muscular contractions. There are three types: isometric, isotonic, and isokinetic. We're not going to worry about isokinetic, okay? We're just going to go with isometric and isotonic today. So isometric contractions are muscles where muscles contract but no movement occurs, okay? So like I said before, if I flex both my bicep and my tricep at the same time, okay, there's tension going through them, but no movement is occurring, all right? Common movement examples of this would be like you doing a wall sit, you know, where you do these ones against the wall and you just hold it, okay? So in that position, your quadriceps and your hamstrings and your glutes are all engaged, but there's no movement occurring. Plank is another very common one, okay? So you're engaging your back, your rectus abdominis, okay, your rectus spinae, but no movement is occurring, or just simply like pushing against the wall. All right, if I just went and pushed, okay, probably generating a whole lot of tension in my triceps, my back, my shoulders, even my legs and my glutes, but no movement's occurring, okay, because the wall is stronger than I am for now. The other one, which is the main one we're talking about, is our isotonic contractions, okay? So isotonic muscle contractions, there is a clear agonist in that movement, and movement occurs in one of two ways, all right? We can have concentric contractions, or we can have eccentric contractions, okay? Concentric, eccentric, all right? I like to remember these concentric. I feel like it's like it makes a circle, like closing, okay? So a concentric contraction means that the muscle that causes the movement is shortening, okay? So for example, if I was doing a bicep curl, when I'm doing the upward phase of my bicep curl, we know that a bicep curl engages the bicep as its main agonist, and it is shortening, and you can feel it shortening, all right? So in the upward phase of a bicep curl, this is the agonist, and it is a concentric contraction. Now, an eccentric contraction is where the muscle that is causing the movement or absorbing the tension is lengthening. So when I'm going down with the bicep curl, okay, so I've come up, I'm now going down, all right? There is still intensity and pressure being generated in my bicep on the downward phase, okay? If there wasn't, if I just like completely lost it, I'd probably drop the weight, I'd probably snap my elbow or something like that, all right? So eccentric, the bicep is still absorbing the force, but the muscle is lengthening, okay? So the downward phase of bicep curl. And this applies to all movements, and we're gonna do a whole bunch of them in class as an activity so that you get comfortable with identifying what is the agonist and antagonist pairings and in which direction is the concentric and eccentric happening, all right? So they are our types of muscular contractions. All right, last thing I want to cover in this video before we then do a whole video just on the muscles in the body, okay, the main ones. The difference between fast and slow twitch muscle fibers, okay? So this is one of those things where I'm going to talk and you probably should write about something I'm going to say, because I haven't wrote it all up here. Fast and twitch slow muscle fibers are mainly genetically determined, all right? As in, most of the time you are born with what you get. That's why if you go look at like primary school kids, they're not all the same age. They haven't done any training, like weight training and stuff like that. They're all different shapes and sizes, et cetera, because naturally some of them have higher degrees of slow twitch muscle fibers in their body, and some of them have higher degrees of fast twitch muscle fibers in the body. This is also why two people can eat the same diet, do the same gym routine, and one person is struggling to progress, or they progress very slowly, and the other person just looks like they've just taken steroids overnight, all right? Different types of fibers. Now, in your training, you can change your fiber type to a degree, all right? They've worked out that you can train, like without, we're talking about natural training, without drugs, all right? Without drugs, you can change your percentage of fiber type across your whole body by about 10%. It's not much, all right? This is why, like elite athletes at level, like the highest level in the world, they are genetically gifted and they've pursued training to suit their genetics, all right? This is why everybody can't be the fastest sprinter in the world. So, with all that out of the way, let's talk about the two different fibers. So there's slow twitch, which is type 1 or type I, and 2, fast twitch, type 2A and type 2B. So slow twitch, type 1 fibers, if you look at them under a microscope, they are reddish in appearance because they have a higher blood content and therefore higher oxygen concentration in the muscle fibers themselves, all right? They have great aerobic capacity, so they can go and go and go and go, all right? They are generally smaller in size, all right? And they are very well suited to endurance events. For example, long distance running, long distance swimming, power walking, etc. All right. If you go look at marathon runners, the top level marathon runners, none of them are big steroid bulking up people. They are like skinny. They look like they don't eat enough food, but because their bodies have lots and lots of these smaller, slow twitch fibers that are highly aerobic, and they can just keep going and going and going and going. All right. On the opposite end of the spectrum, on the very opposite end of the spectrum, we have type 2B, and somewhere in between we have type 2A. So type 2A, we call them intermediary fibers, all right? So they're a bit of both. They have a little bit of this capacity and a little bit of that capacity. They still fall into the type 2 category, but they're neither here nor there. So when we talk about fast twitch, we're mainly referring to type 2B fibers. So type 2B fibers under a microscope, they are white in appearance. They're white because they have lower blood supply, all right? So they're not getting oxygen because generally they don't need oxygen. And we'll talk about that in more depth when we get to energy systems, all right? They use something else for energy. They're generally larger in size, okay? They are excellent at producing force, power, strength, etc., okay? For example, Olympic lifters, sprinters, shot putters, think of anyone who does anything explosive or using strength and power like that, they are going to have larger concentrations of fast twitch fibers in their body. All right. So remember, if you really wanted to be an elite level sprinter, you can train and you can change some of your slow twitch fibers into fast twitch fibers, but it's not going to be a great effect as opposed to someone who is naturally born with higher concentration of fast twitch fibers in their legs, for example. All right. So that's the difference between fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. And I'll end that video here. In the next one, we're going to go through all of the main muscles in the body. Thanks.